I'm wearing my Jaggy helmet today off Fist of the North Star that time, because wearing a wacky costume is a substitute for having an appealing personality. Let's see if I can wear my hat with it. No.
I see.
To be honest, I'm just wearing the helmet because I can't be bothered to wash all the dirt and chocolate off my face. Anyway, I played that there Shenmue III this week for a bit. And before we talk about Shenmue and its history as a product in today's episode, and we take that quite seriously, I've got to ask about Shenmue 3. Is that serious? Like, it's not a joke, is it? Because I'm worried it might be a joke that only Shenmue fans get, and people like me who play it and try and take it seriously are not in on a goof, and so we get egg on our faces amongst all the dirt and chocolate. It's just like, $59.99 is a lot for what that is. That already seems like a bit of a giggle that director Yu Suzuki is having. But then I started playing it and saw how plasticky it looked, how robotic the animations appeared to be, the fuck-awful dialogue, and the equally fuck-awful voice acting. After all these years, Ryo is still a gormless prick who says, "I see," in response to absolutely fucking everything. It hasn't progressed at all. Is it a parody? Is Shenmue 3 a parody of Shenmue and video games in general? Genuine question, is it a fucking joke?
What do you want?
I'm looking for someone named Yuan.
No, I haven't.
Shenmue has always been a failure. That's not an opinion, friends. That's just a grimly objective fact of life. In this world, there are niche games that have a distinct audience and tailor themselves perfectly towards said audience with appropriate budgets and targeted marketing. And then there are niche games that don't appreciate quite how niche they are and become massive fucking wastes of cash. I'm sorry to say that Shenmue as a series, inhabits the latter category. Shenmue 3, the long-awaited continuation of Ryo Hazuki's Dreamcast-born story, is finally out on store shelves, but there's a very good chance you might not have known that due to the game's lackluster at best marketing. It appears to have released with about as much fanfare as a little wet fart. There have been mixed reviews, but outside of those, not a lot of press has been generated by EastNet's crowdfunded sequel. Certainly not what you'd expect of a game that was announced with massive amounts of hype and shock from a stunned E3 viewership in 2015. Despite millions of dollars in crowdfunding, years of anticipation from fans, and plenty of headline news over time, Shenmue 3 finally released and, well, that was kind of it. It just sort of potted its way out there, and that's that. It would appear that sales data is trending accurately with the lack of widespread interest in Shenmue 3's release. It was recently revealed that the game's performance in Japan, where one might expect to see it most succeed, has been pretty fucking atrocious. The PS4 version did, for example, shift 17,857 copies and had the worst opening for a Shenmue game in terms of sales, performing worse than even the remasters of Shenmue 1 and 2 released last year. This is despite it being the best-selling PS4 game in its launch week, which can perhaps be credited to a bit of a dry console week overall. Shenmue 3 also failed to break into the UK top 10 chart, debuting instead at a humble 17. This is not what one would ordinarily expect of a game so anticipated and clamoured for. People on Reddit and elsewhere have been debating about the reason for this disappointing showing. Some have speculated that it was all down to mediocre marketing efforts. Others have pinned it on the revelation that Shenmue 3 was not the narrative conclusion fans have been waiting for since 2001, instead ending on yet another cliffhanger with no indication it won't be another 18 years before a next chapter. Still others have blamed the controversy surrounding Shenmue 3's Epic Store exclusivity deal, suggesting it soured enough customers to tank sales. An unlikely idea. More likely is the speculation that a game with a cult following didn't sell very well because the vast majority of the people who wanted it already secured their copy when they crowdfunded the thing 4 years ago. And here's where that grimly objective fact comes in. Historically, Shenmue has always been a failure. In fact, one could even call it the Waterworld of video games. That is not a particularly controversial statement to anyone but the game's most blinkered fans. It certainly isn't an untrue statement, it's just data at the end of the day.
Do you know of a place where sailors hang out?
Sailors? I see them at night.
Look, the original Shenmue is adored by its fans even today for some reason, and for its time it was most definitely a groundbreaking game of unmatched scale and ambition. Its large size, cavalcade of distracting minigames, and innovative schedule-based gameplay turned a lot of heads in 1999, and while I think the game has always been an unforgivably ponderous time waster, it was still critically acclaimed and earned a dedicated fan base. It was also a massive fucking flop. An expensive, massive fucking flop. While it earned 1.2 million sales and became the Dreamcast's 4th best-selling game, what is it about Shenmue and being the 4th best? The sheer expense of its production meant whatever success it achieved could not outweigh how much it cost Sega to produce. Shenmue could not have launched at a worse time for Sega, putting a cap on years of financial decline and failed hardware. I mean, through the lens of hardware history, being the Dreamcast's 4th best-selling game isn't all that laudable, considering its brief lifespan and lack of third-party interest. Fact was, however well it may have performed, it dealt a devastating financial blow to the company. A major problem was that Yu Suzuki was hot shit at the time, riding high off the success of such games as Virtua Fighter, Outrun, and Daytona USA. His superstar status as an arcade moneymaker allowed him the clout to secure a massive budget and create the masterpiece of his dreams. Unfortunately, when a developer is given the keys to the money vault, there's a risk that more than cash will get taken. Piss is what could get taken. As in, Yu Suzuki took the fucking piss. Now, I'm all for developers making the games they want to make, but not every developer is a business person. And even I, someone who rails against corporations all the bloody time, even I know that you can't just keep spending and spending without worrying about whether you'll make any money back. Not all the money in the world like these AAA publishers are obsessed with, but you've got to at least not lose a ton of money on the project. When you look at what went into the game, at the time the word extravagant could be the most applicable descriptor, and not even that does justice to the extravagance of it all. The game boasted 1,200 rooms and over 300 characters with their own unique personalities, luxuries of the time such as real-time cutscenes and motion capture, and English voice acting that, at Suzuki's command, had to be recorded in Japan rather than, you know, studios local to the localized actors. Of the game's excesses, localizer Jeremy Blaustein said, Suzuki was coming off of past successes and he was the man. And so this was going to be the thing. And everyone wanted a piece of that $70 million, you know? And of course, that's like the worst thing you could do, is to start out a project saying, we've got all this money, and then just keep throwing more money at it. While that $70 million figure has been stated to be Shenmue's overall development costs, Suzuki claims it was closer to $47 million. Whichever figure is more accurate, however, is largely immaterial. Either way, Shenmue was for its time the most expensive game ever made. It stands as a testament to hubris, the auteur's folly, what happens when a self-indulgent director is allowed to stuff their whims into a project with nobody telling them no. Kind of like Hideo Kojima, except Kojima's games tend to make money. So massive was the failure, some have even attributed it, in part, to Sega's exit from the hardware market. But Sega was nothing if not a stupidly short-sighted company at the time, and it had already greenlit a sequel, which was being partially developed alongside the original Shenmue. With much of the groundwork being laid out thanks to tandem development, Shenmue 2's budget was considered far more reasonable, and Sega likely hoped its completion and subsequent release in 2001 could recuperate the original's significant losses. It didn't. By 2003, Shenmue 2 was reported to have sold 100,000 copies on Dreamcast, a mere tenth of the original's figures. In the US, Microsoft had signed an exclusivity deal for Shenmue 2 on Xbox, and while figures don't seem readily available, it sold reportedly poorly due to a combination of the Xbox's high price at the time, poor marketing, and a lack of Western interest in the game overall. It didn't help that the Xbox version was criticised for being a bad port and wasn't considered a visually impressive game among the system's other high-profile titles. Basically, Shenmue's a flop. An unapologetic money vacuum of a flop at that. Despite this, Yu Suzuki's grand vision for the Shenmue series has barely scaled back. The first Shenmue was at one point going to contain 16 chapters worth of story, but its final state only covered one of them. That story has become 11 chapters intended to have been realised over the course of 4 or 5 games. Unfortunately, Shenmue 3 entered a development hell from which it couldn't escape over the 10-year period following Shenmue 2's release up to Yu Suzuki's departure from Sega in 2011 to focus on his own studio EastNet. Between these two events, Shenmue Online was announced in 2004, and was seemingly pretty troubled too. Originally a joint project between Sega Japan and JC Entertainment, JC withdrew from development roughly a year after announcement, taking 50% of the Shenmue Online rights with it. Despite this, Yu Suzuki promised the game would be released and that the project was well on its way to completion while hitting all its goals. As of 2019, Shenmue Online has not been released. It's worth noting that before Shenmue 3's eventual announcement, EastNet has not exactly been a prolific developer. In 2010, while Suzuki was still with Sega, EastNet developed Shenmue City, a game for mobile and PC that ultimately never made it to PC. Shenmue City was intended to capitalise on the enormous success of the casual game Mafia Wars, with Suzuki reasoning that if they could emulate Mafia Wars' traction, that could be leveraged to make another large-scale Shenmue game. Yeah, Shenmue City was launched in December 2010 and shut down in December 2011. In the time since, EastNet has mostly focused on small-scale mobile games, and Suzuki's role as a director has been far from earth-shattering. So far, he's directed Virtua Fighter Kill Champ in 2011, Bullet Pirates in 2013, and Virtua Fighter Fever Combo in 2014, all for mobile platforms. If you're wondering exactly why Shenmue 3 looks so dated, plays so archaically, and generally doesn't appear to have taken lessons from any gameplay advancements in the almost 2 decades since Shenmue 2's release, well, the reason might be that Yu Suzuki literally hasn't learned anything from modern games due to a complete lack of experience. In terms of larger scale games for PC and console, Suzuki is literally picking up right where he left off. Nonetheless, this didn't deter him from taking stage during Sony's E3 2015 press conference with impressive amounts of gall to ask during a major platform holder's show, and already with its financial backing, for some of that sweet crowdfunding cash. And boy oh boy did Suzuki get it. Soon after announcement, Shenmue 3 became the fastest Kickstarter project to reach $1 million, doing so within 1 hour and 44 minutes. By the time the Kickstarter campaign wrapped up, it had accrued 69,000 backers, nice, to the tune of $6.3 million. EastNet, however, did not stop there, pursuing further public backing with PayPal donations for even more cash. EastNet, however, did not stop there either, moving on to Chinese crowdfunding platform Alipay to make more cash on top of the more cash on top of the cash. By September of 2018, Shenmue 3 had reached a final crowdfunded figure of $7,179,510, contributed by 81,087 people. On top of that, however, Shenmue 3 was drawing in money from a number of companies. As previously noted, Sony itself was lending financial support to its development, alongside Monaco-based entertainment company Shibuya Productions. Sega was also reportedly helping out too. In 2017, the game had acquired a publisher in Deep Silver, lending even more additional support for its development. However, the most controversial source of additional funding was by far Epic Games. Most of you are well aware of the shitstorm by now. The Epic Games Store has been a major source of resentment for many PC users, and Epic's practice of using its fortune to secure exclusive details for its store and starve the market so competitors like Steam and GOG miss out on new releases has come under fire. Often on this show for being a shining example of how triple capitalism gives those with the most money total liberty to kill their competition without being truly competitive. How free this market is. A ton of studios regularly come under fire for taking an exclusivity deal, sometimes deservedly, sometimes not, and EastNet was broadly torn into by the community for broken promises such as explicitly pledged Steam codes for backers. The controversy is well documented, but what's most pertinent for this discussion is the lucrativity of the Epic deal. In addition to a better revenue split, Epic will throw a ton of money at you for that exclusivity. Basically, on top of millions in crowdfunding, on top of support from Sony, on top of support from Shibuya Productions, on top of support from Sega, on top of support from Deep Silver, EastNet was taking yet more money for Shenmue III. And the end result was a game that appears to have learned nothing in the 18 years since its predecessor came out with visuals to match. Meanwhile, Yu Suzuki's ambition has not abated. As each infusion of new cash came in, his plans only got bigger. One of the game's first delays was a pushback to a late 2018 release. And when that happened, Suzuki said that new technologies allowed him to make the game bigger and more beautiful than initially expected. When Deep Silver came aboard, Suzuki said he could make the game with a larger scale featuring open world elements. Never mind Shenmue 3 having learned nothing as a game, it would appear Yu Suzuki has not learned anything as a budget-constrained developer either. This has been a problem with a lot of crowd-funded developers. They are not business people, so as they make more money, their ambitions get bigger, they lose sight of what they can actually realistically do. Shenmue sold 1.2 million on the Dreamcast for its 1999 Japan release and 2000 Western release. That is not unimpressive. In fact, for the time, it's damn good and would, by reasonable metrics, have been a success had Suzuki's project not gotten so bloated and indulgent and decadent. However, for all its innovation, for all its broken ground, for all its inspiration for future games, it did not retain a large fan base. It had a dedicated fan base, but not a large one. Shenmue 2 couldn't come close to matching its predecessor's sales, suggesting that perhaps all that opulent, self-satisfying, critically acclaimed game design and associated disrespect of the player's time due to what can diplomatically be called developer wank had done little to curry lasting favour with initial buyers. I mean, how many people would realistically play a game where you spend hours waiting around for shops to open before the story can progress and love that enough to ask for more? About a tenth of them, apparently. Shenmue as a series has asked for all this cash and simply hasn't produced an audience big enough to justify it, refusing to scale back in the face of reality. Almost impressive were it not so deluded. In any case, the audience for Shenmue is not big and hasn't appeared to have grown one iota. Shenmue hasn't been big since the original, and as the years passed, its name has only slipped further into obscurity, and a failed mobile game and unfinished MMO didn't help. The remastered releases of 2018 probably didn't help either, showing just how dated the whole thing is. Especially when you consider that filling Shenmue's void all this time has been the Yakuza series. A series that does everything Shenmue did, but better and more successfully. Yakuza is better in every goddamn way, and going back to Shenmue in the wake of it only exposes how ancient and creaking and obsolete it is. Yet Shenmue 3 didn't take any cues from Yakuza, it took its cues from Shenmue. Great for Shenmue's fanbase, and Shenmue's fanbase only, Shenmue's zealous, but ultimately tiny, fanbase. If anything, it's almost impressive that the Shenmue series still has the rabid fanbase it has, But we all have to be honest here, Shenmue is a money vacuum. It sucks up vast amounts of money, and as it does so, the ambitions of its director only explode and get more wild, and the end result is a game that not all that many really give a fuck about. I understand there are those that do. I understand that Yu Suzuki has this massive vision of a great long winding story, but given Shenmue's history as a game, maybe Suzuki should just write a fucking book.
I'm trying to locate some sailors.
None of this is to say that Shenmue 3 will definitely turn out to be a disaster. Maybe it will break the Waterworld curse, or at least break even. Maybe, thanks to crowdfunding, it truly doesn't need many sales to succeed. In an ideal scenario, that's exactly how it should work. You make a niche game, it's crowdfunded by the niche audience, it's supply and demand working in its purest form. But the amount of extra financial involvement definitely complicates the whole thing, and we'll have to wait for history to show whether or not Shenmue 3 has continued the series' tradition of dragging coin into a black hole. I will say that, given the series' dogged past and never certain future, it was narratively irresponsible to not give the game a conclusive payoff, though in a way you have to admire that level of confidence, bordering on arrogance. Yu Suzuki is certain that his masterpiece will be complete, and it's hard to fault him that. Also, none of this video is rooted in bitterness that Shenmue fans got a third installment of their terrible game series, and I never even got a second Gitaroo Man. Not in the fucking slightest.
I see.
Hi, do you know of a place where sailors hang out? Ha ha ha. That is a reference to Shenmue. That is good, isn't it? Anyway, I don't begrudge Yu Suzuki for following his dream. And despite the fact that he keeps asking for so much money, and he's very good at spending other people's money, I don't think he's a grifter. I don't think there's anything shady there. I just think he is very adept at spending other people's money. And it is very easy to have big dreams and ideas when it is another bank account that's open to you. But we do all have to appreciate the fact that despite Shenmue being one of the most requested game returns of all time, being one of the fastest Kickstarter projects to reach $1 million, despite the records it broke and the ground it broke, most people just don't give a shit. And while I've been snarky and sarcastic about it, I understand. I appreciate it, I empathise, I sympathise with it, I identify with it. Because despite how brilliant I am, despite how groundbreaking I am, despite how successfully crowdfunded this show is, no one really gives a shit. Thank God for me.